Hi, I'm Jake, and I'm going to refute Giovanni's speech and claim that the ban on pit bulls is an injustice claim against all pit bulls and it must be removed. I first want to say that this wasn't a claim of fact, but it was a claim of value or policy. But he did use his secondary points that he was giving a kind of a history on the perspective and view of pit bulls. Secondly, he talked about kind of the source of the pit bull issue, and that 3, the ban will not prevent further dog attacks. So my claim against him is that the ban on pit bulls is necessary and will prevent further or future deaths from pit bull attacks. So first of all, Gio, he brings up a brief history on pit bulls, and it kind of hurts his argument. I'm basically going to just present it in the same way that he did. It's believed that, I think he got this information from pitbull411.com because he didn't cite it, but I was able to find it even though he didn't even put a link in his citation. It is believed that pit bulls came from Greece and they were originally used in battle. He then went on to say that they moved to Rome and were used for fighting entertainment purposes in the Colosseum. And then baiting was introduced in Great Britain, and they were put up against bulls, and whoever or whichever pit bull could bring them down first would be the best. And now dogfighting is obviously the new kind of violent, illegal activity that they're in now today. But I think all this evidence that he put forward, showing how aggressive and dangerous they are, just really goes against, I don't know why he'd bring it up, it really just goes against what his claim was. And I think it would have been more beneficial to his argument if he had left out that they could bring down 2,000 to 3,000 pound bulls. Secondly, he then goes over the source of the issue, that some of the citations he makes here in his secondary claim is by an English philosopher, Thomas Hobbes. Every human is born cruel and simply does things to benefit themselves. So it's okay to stereotype all humans as being born cruel, but it's too much to call pit bulls dangerous or inherently dangerous to society. So he then claims how these aggressive pit bulls are treated without any sources or studies of these dog attacks, also saying that pit bulls that are chained up are a part of the aggressive issue. Even with dog fighting already illegal as well as animal cruelty, Gio says that owners can be held responsible for their dog's actions. This is true, but these actions these attacks are present from these dogs aren't affected by whether these activities towards the dogs are illegal or not. They're still going to happen, and the only thing that can further help is a ban. And his third point in trying to prove that a ban would prevent attacks, Gio brings up that from dogbites.org, in 2011 there were 31 fatal dog attacks, and he doesn't give a percentage, but it was 71% of the dog attacks, or fatal dog attacks, were from pit bulls. He then says that roughly 50% of the attacks were because the dogs were not chained up properly, and that were on the owner itself, as if that was somewhat of a better thing. And so as if dog attacks to neighbors or others are more tragic than to the owners of the dog. From the same source, dogbites.org, in 2011, 15-day-old Darius Tillman was killed at home from a family pit bull, as well as Jenny Arcega, a 47-year-old woman, was also killed by her own pit bull in San Bernardino, California this last year. So not only are pit bulls capable of killing small children, they are able to take down full-size adults. In 2011, from dogbites.org, as well as on source, 15 victims were between the ages of 32 and 76, and 7 victims were 5 years and younger. So with pit bulls only taking up 5% of the dog population in 2011, pit bulls account for still 71% of the dog attack fatalities towards humans. So if citizens cannot be responsible for their own dog's aggression, then further actions must be made to protect others and careless owners. And that's all I got.
All right, well, you lay out the advocate's claims pretty well. I think you spend too much time on that first point doing the same thing that the advocate did, reviewing the history. I think you want to get to that last point that you make right before you go to the second point, which is basically all of his historical information points out how dangerous the pit bull is. If a pit bull can take down a 2,000-pound bull, we know that there's something wrong here, that this is a potentially dangerous animal. Now the only question is, are they inherently dangerous, or is there anything that we can do to prevent that? And that's what I'm going to talk about on the other 2 points. So I think you could edit a little bit and focus on the claim. I think when you do talk about the claim, you do a pretty good job about it. Talking about the advocate's lack of evidence on the second point. I thought it was an interesting contrast that you made about the generalization, that they're citing a generalization about human beings, but we're not allowed to generalize about pit bulls. There's something inconsistent about that. I think that that builds some credibility for your position, although I don't know that it directly responds to the point that's being presented there. The argument about whether or not it's somebody's actions or responsibilities, I think there's a good argument somewhere in there, but it needs to be a lot clearer what you're saying on that point, and that becomes a similar problem on the next point. On the third point, though, that's where you have the strongest discussion of the evidence and your clearest conclusions. Even though you come back to that responsibility issue, I thought you handled the numbers pretty well. Look, pit bulls represent 5% of the population of dogs, but they account for 71% of the fatal injuries. They kill babies, they kill adults. They're damn dangerous animals, period. Now, what difference does it make if it's dangerous because, if it got off of a leash or out of a yard or any of those kinds of things, it still does produce this particular result. Would the dog have been able to do those things if they didn't exist or they weren't in those areas? No. That's the way you simplify the argument. And I think that you get to that eventually, but it takes a little bit longer than it ought to. All right, thank you. Speaking of taking a little bit longer than it ought to.